Hi, before we start today's stories, I noticed most people watch my videos without subscribing my YouTube channel. I plan to share one story every day for next 365 days. Be a part of my journey. Spring break of 1997 was shaping up to be a week of relaxation and adventure. I was embarking on a road trip from Lubbock to Houston, eagerly anticipating the days of leisure ahead. With a few planned stops along the way, the drive was estimated to take about 8.5 to 9 hours. I couldn't wait to unwind. My trusty companion for this journey was an '85 Sentra hatchback, a relic from a different era. No air conditioning, no cruise control, just me and the open road. Thanks, Dad. Due to work commitments, I couldn't hit the road until about 6 p.m. I decided to grab a quick bite at a friend's house before venturing forth. By the time I left my friend's place, it was already 7 p.m., and the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon. The drive itself was largely uneventful until I reached the city of Austin. It was around 12:30 a.m. when I arrived, and I spotted a bank of payphones, a relic of a time when not everyone carried a cell phone. I decided to give my friend a call to let him know I was feeling wide awake and planned to make the short drive to Houston. My friend, concerned about the late hour, cautioned me. "It's pretty late, man," he warned. I assured him, "Nah, I'm good. I'll call you in the morning when I'm in hometown." With that, I hung up the phone, filled up my gas tank, and resumed my journey. It was now 1 a.m., and the night was dark and quiet. Around 2:30 a.m., I found myself nearing Brenham, and exhaustion began to set in. I was doing everything I could to stay awake, blasting loud music, opening the car window to let in the brisk night air, even resorting to slapping my own face and delivering the occasional punch to my thigh. But nothing seemed to work, and my eyelids felt like lead. Just past Brenham on Highway 290, there's a stretch of road that features a combination levee and bridge designed to keep the freeway high and dry during floods. It was an eerie sight even in the daylight, but at night, with no lights to guide the way, it became something out of a nightmare. As I struggled to keep my eyes open, the last thing I remember was closing them for a brief moment. When I opened them again, it was as if I had woken from a terrible dream. My car was hurtling down the steep embankment of the levee, and I was inside, helpless. I must have been going at least 60 to 70 miles per hour when I descended that hill. Miraculously, the high grass at the bottom of the levee prevented me from flipping over or crashing into its base. My car came to a stop about 15 feet from the bottom, hidden from the view of the road above. I was disoriented and panicked, trapped in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone signal, no witnesses, and a car that refused to start. My heart sank as I realized the direness of my situation. After a quick self-check to ensure I was okay physically, I mustered the strength to climb out of the car through the driver's side door. I needed to flag down help, but in the dead of night, in a desolate area like this, it seemed like an impossible task. Who would stop for some stranger, especially one who, as a Mexican-looking fellow, might be perceived as a threat? Then, like a beacon of hope in the darkness, an 18-wheeler pulled over. The trucker offered me his cell phone, and I called my dad, who seemed unsure of what to do. "Thanks, Pop." I also called for a wrecker to come and pull my car out of its precarious position. The trucker kindly offered to wait with me until the wrecker arrived, but I got an eerie feeling just sitting there alone in the middle of the night. I told the trucker, "Yeah, I'm good. I'll wait by the side of the road." He drove off into the night, and once again, I was alone. The minutes seemed to drag on, and I realized I might be waiting for the wrecker for an hour or more. It was then that I decided to give my car one more shot. I got back inside, turned the key, and, miraculously, it started. My car fired to life, and I shifted it into reverse. It felt like a Christmas miracle. Slowly and cautiously, I backed up the embankment until I reached the top by the side of the freeway. I stepped out and did a quick assessment. The wheels seemed fine, and there was no noticeable damage to the body. The engine, though resembling the underbelly of a lawnmower, appeared to be intact. The belts were still holding up. I was good to go. With a renewed sense of determination, I put the car in first gear and hit the road again, albeit at a significantly reduced speed. The damage to the wheels had resulted in a wobble, but I didn't care. I needed to get home, and nothing was going to stop me. Finally, I arrived at my parents' house around 5 a.m. Exhausted, sore, and still a bit in shock, I shared the harrowing tale of my ordeal before collapsing into my bed. When I woke up sometime around noon, I mustered the strength to inspect the damage to my car. I had stripped 2 of the 4 lugs off the right wheel and 1 lug off the left wheel. It was a small miracle that the wheels had stayed on after my disastrous descent down the levee. I also couldn't shake the chilling realization that if I had gone off the road just 15 seconds later, my car might have ended up upside down in a creek. So, the lesson here is crystal clear: never underestimate the power of sleep during a long road trip. My near miss with disaster on that spring break night of 1997 taught me a valuable lesson, one that I will never forget. It was a moonless night when I decided to embark on that eerie drive through the canyon near my house in Southern California. The winding road seemed to vanish into the abyss, surrounded by tall trees that cast long, menacing shadows in the dim glow of my car's headlights. As I began my journey, I couldn't help but think about the stories I'd heard regarding the neighboring canyon, the one infamous for being haunted due to its dark history, Native American burial grounds, unsolved murders, and tales of restless spirits. Normally, I'd bring my girlfriend along for these night drives. She and her family possessed a heightened sense of spirituality, and she often claimed to have felt the presence of otherworldly entities in specific areas of the canyon. Sometimes, she even swore she sensed something lurking in the back seat of my car while we drove through that desolate landscape. I'd always brushed it off as an overactive imagination or mere coincidence. Little did I know that this night would change my perspective forever. On this particular night, I was driving alone. The solitude of the canyon was unsettling, as if it held secrets buried deep within its rugged terrain. The only sound accompanying me was the soft hum of the engine and the occasional rustling of leaves in the cool breeze. As I navigated the dark and winding road, a water bottle I had placed in the back seat started to emit strange crackling noises. It was an odd occurrence, and I couldn't explain it. My initial reaction was to laugh it off, attributing the mysterious sound to a loose cap or some other logical explanation. But then, I remembered the countless times my girlfriend had spoken of sensing otherworldly entities in the back seat. With a playful grin, I turned my head towards the empty back seat and jokingly shushed it, as if I were addressing an invisible passenger responsible for the peculiar noise. I chuckled to myself, thinking I was being absurdly superstitious. Little did I know that this would prove to be a grave mistake. No more than 5 seconds after my playful jest, I felt it, a cold, ethereal touch, like the delicate brush of fingers against the back of my head. My heart leapt into my throat, and a shiver raced down my spine. It was an inexplicable sensation, one that I couldn't attribute to any rational explanation. It felt as if something had passed right through my hair, its presence chillingly tangible yet otherworldly. I couldn't deny the terror that surged through my veins. My grip on the steering wheel tightened, and my eyes darted around the dark road ahead, searching for any signs of what had just transpired. The weight of that moment, the unexplainable touch that had violated my solitude, hung heavy in the air. In a trembling voice I stammered, sorry," as if addressing the unseen entity that had intruded upon my drive. My pulse raced, and I forced myself to keep my eyes on the road, though my instincts screamed at me to flee from that place. But I couldn't escape the feeling that something unseen, something beyond the realm of the living, was with me in that car. As I continued down the winding road, the sense of dread that had always haunted this canyon intensified. The once familiar route now seemed like a labyrinth of darkness and uncertainty. Every rustle of leaves, every shadowy figure in the periphery of my vision, sent my heart into overdrive. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched by something that should not exist. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and I finally emerged from the canyon, my car's tires meeting the smooth pavement of the suburban streets. The oppressive atmosphere of the canyon lifted, and a wave of relief washed over me. I made it out, but I was forever changed by that inexplicable encounter. To this day, I grapple with the question of whether it was a mere trick of the mind or a genuine encounter with a supernatural presence. I've shared my story with friends and family, but few can offer any rational explanations. Some believe that the canyon's dark history has left a lasting imprint on the land, while others are convinced that I had indeed brushed against the realm of the supernatural that night. One thing is certain, the memory of that chilling touch on the back of my head continues to haunt my thoughts. And whenever I pass by that canyon, I can't help but wonder if there are forces at play beyond our comprehension, lurking in the darkness, waiting to make their presence known to those who dare to venture into their realm. It happened several years ago, during the late autumn or early winter months. I was a deeply religious person back then, and on that particular evening, my friends and I were on our way to attend one of those living nativity events. You know the kind, where actors portray the Virgin Mary, Joseph, the wise men, and others, all part of a reenactment set in the great outdoors. This event was taking place at a Christian campgrounds located just outside of a nearby city, and since we weren't familiar with the area, we had asked someone for directions. As we set out on our journey, the sun was already setting, casting long shadows across the landscape. Winter in the United States meant that darkness fell early, and we were soon enveloped in the twilight. We arrived in the general vicinity without any issues, but the name of the exit we were supposed to take to reach the campgrounds had slipped our minds. Fortunately, a large sign loomed ahead, positioned right next to an exit. We assumed this was our way in, and without much hesitation, we took the road it led to. Crisis seemingly averted. The city adjacent to the campgrounds was sizable, and the exit we had chosen was not far from a bustling shopping district. However, what we encountered next was entirely unexpected. The exit, which had initially appeared to lead to civilization, abruptly transformed into a dense thicket of woods. We figured that this must be the right path, as after all, it was a campground, and one could expect to find such places in wooded areas. So we pressed on. As we continued along the road, we noticed a clearing on the right side. It was a relatively small area, about 50 feet across, and beyond it lay more woods. At the very edge of the woods, before the onset of complete darkness, we spotted a colossal stone gate with ornate wrought iron doors. It had the appearance of a gate you might find at a cemetery, but it didn't lead to any path or trail, just more trees. Oddly, there was no fence encircling it, just the gate standing alone. We commented on how creepy it looked but thought little more of it. The fog was beginning to settle in around us. I should mention that despite it being winter, the weather was unusually mild, and there was no snow on the ground. We continued to drive, and a short while later, we came upon a row of houses. This is where things took a bizarre and unsettling turn. The first house we passed was a typical suburban home, painted in plain white. However, in the driveway, which was quite short, there was a van with all of its doors flung wide open. The hazard lights were flashing, indicating that the vehicle was running, yet there was no one in or around it. To make matters eerier, the house itself was shrouded in darkness. An unease settled over us as we speculated on what could have transpired. Our driver, not me, instinctively slowed down to investigate. Then, the friend sitting in the front passenger seat pointed ahead. To our astonishment, every house on the street, on both sides of the road, exhibited the same unsettling characteristics. All the houses were plunged into darkness, and every car parked in the driveways had its doors ajar, with the hazard lights eerily blinking. At this juncture, we were more than a little unnerved. We couldn't help but feel as though we had unwittingly stumbled into the set of a horror movie, or perhaps the target of an elaborate and malicious prank, although it seemed strange for such a prank to occur in the middle of winter, far removed from Halloween. What was most perplexing was that we hadn't encountered a single soul during our drive through this surreal neighborhood. For reasons we couldn't quite explain, we chose to continue driving, perhaps in an attempt to leave this eerie place behind as quickly as possible. As we continued along the road, it bent slightly, and the instant we rounded the corner, something utterly bizarre and terrifying occurred. Out of nowhere, a massive black dog, reminiscent of a German shepherd, suddenly burst into view. It came hurtling toward the driver's side of our car at breakneck speed. I'm still uncertain whether the dog made contact with the car, but it came dangerously close. Instead of retreating after its charge, the dog remained defiantly in the middle of the road, barking relentlessly. In a panic, our driver executed a swift U-turn, and we sped away from that surreal scene as fast as the car could carry us. We abandoned our plans to attend a nativity event, opting instead to head home, and we never made an attempt to return to that unsettling place. When we recounted our strange encounter to the person who had originally provided us with directions, we discovered that we had taken the wrong exit that night. Even now, several years later, we remain uncertain which exit we had mistakenly taken. What we do know is that we were fortunate to escape from that place when we did. I have no desire to ever revisit whatever inexplicable and eerie events were unfolding there that night. It's a memory I'd much rather leave in the past, a place I'd rather never venture back to. No, thank you. I'll pass. I used to work the second shift, which meant I'd get off work around 11:30 at night. On this particular evening, I decided to drive over to my girlfriend's house and spend a few hours there. We had a great time, but as the night wore on, a pretty bad thunderstorm started to brew outside. My girlfriend and I both knew my dog hated storms, and I didn't want to leave her alone at home, scared out of her wits. So, I made the decision to head back to my place. There were two routes I could take from my girlfriend's house to mine. The first one would take me through town, a journey that would last about 20 minutes or so, depending on traffic and weather. The second option was a single-lane dirt road that cut through the woods and only took about 8 minutes. On this stormy night, I opted for the shorter, dirt road route. It was a choice I would come to regret. You see, there were absolutely no houses along this dirt road for about an 8-mile stretch, and it had a reputation for being eerily desolate. The rain was coming down hard as hell, and I found myself slowly creeping down this narrow dirt road in the heart of the Alabama backwoods. The headlights of my truck cut through the darkness and the rain, but visibility was terrible. I was gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, trying to stay focused on the road ahead. As I came around a particularly sharp curve, my heart skipped a beat. There, right in the middle of the road, was a very large man. He stood there like a shadow, drenched by the rain, wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled up over his head. His dark-colored pants and shoes blended in with the night. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching on the wet road as I came to an abrupt stop. My headlights illuminated the man, and for a few tense seconds we locked eyes. He took a few slow, deliberate steps toward my truck, his face obscured by the hood of his hoodie. Panic surged through me, and my mind raced. What the hell was this guy doing out here in the middle of nowhere on a stormy night? Without thinking, I threw my truck into reverse, my heart pounding in my chest. I backed up as fast as I could, never taking my eyes off the man in the road. He continued to approach, his movements deliberate and menacing. Just as he reached the edge of the road, he suddenly veered off and darted into the woods, disappearing into the blackness. My heart was still racing as I sped away from that eerie encounter. I couldn't get the image of the man out of my mind. It was a nightmarish scenario, and I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if I hadn't reacted quickly. Due to being in the middle of nowhere, My cell phone had no reception. So, as soon as I got home, I wasted no time. I called the police and reported the bizarre incident, describing the man and the unsettling encounter in detail. The dispatcher assured me that they would send officers out to investigate. 2 nights later, I received a chilling revelation. A woman had experienced a similar encounter on that very same dirt road. It wasn't just a bizarre coincidence. It was something far more sinister. This time, the man had actually attempted to get into her car, sending her into a panic. The news sent shivers down my spine. It was clear that this man, whoever he was not just a random passerby. He had some dark intentions, and it was a miracle that I had managed to escape unscathed. The police launched an extensive search of the woods and the surrounding area, but the man remained elusive. They found what appeared to be a makeshift camp deep in the woods, suggesting that he might have been living there. Yet, despite their efforts, they never managed to locate the man himself. As days turned into weeks, the sense of unease and fear in the community grew. The mysterious man in the black hoodie became a local legend, a boogeyman lurking in the woods. People started avoiding the dirt road altogether, and tales of strange encounters and eerie sightings began to circulate. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the man knew who I was and where I lived. Every sound in the night became a potential threat, and I started locking my doors and windows religiously. Sleep became a luxury, as nightmares of that rainy night haunted my every moment of rest. The police continued their efforts, patrolling the area regularly and warning residents to be vigilant. But it seemed that the man had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only fear and uncertainty. As the weeks turned into months, the eerie incidents faded from the headlines, and life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. But I couldn't forget the terror of that night, the feeling of being hunted by a faceless predator in the darkness. To this day, I wonder who that man was and what he wanted. I wonder if he's still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. And I can't help but feel a shiver down my spine every time I drive down that dirt road, haunted by the memory of that fateful encounter. The Alabama backwoods hold many secrets, and some of them are darker than we can ever imagine. The man in the black hoodie remains a chilling enigma, a ghostly figure that haunts the depths of the forest, a reminder that sometimes, the most terrifying horrors are the ones we can't see coming.